Most people learn the Louisiana Purchase as a brilliant real estate deal. Thomas Jefferson, ever the visionary, doubled the size of the United States for the bargain price of $15 million, roughly 4 cents an acre. A triumph of American diplomacy, a masterstroke of territorial expansion. The deal that made America a continental power. But if you look closer than the textbooks ever go, you'll find a very different story. The Louisiana Purchase wasn't a negotiation, it was a fire sale. Napoleon didn't sell Louisiana because he wanted to. He sold it because he was drowning in debt, hemorrhaging money in the Caribbean, and desperately needed cash to fund a war he couldn't afford to lose. America didn't buy Louisiana. It caught Napoleon at his most financially vulnerable moment and capitalized on his desperation. And in a twist that reveals how modern finance actually works, the United States didn't even have the money. It borrowed the purchase price from the very banks that were financing Napoleon's enemies. Welcome to the Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks. To understand why Napoleon sold half a continent for what amounts to pocket change in today's terms, you need to understand what was happening in the Caribbean in 1802. Napoleon had inherited Louisiana from Spain through a secret treaty, and his plan was simple. Rebuild France's colonial empire in the Americas with Louisiana as the breadbasket and Saint-Domingue, modern-day Haiti, as the cash cow. Saint-Domingue was the most profitable colony on Earth. It produced more wealth than all 13 American colonies combined. Sugar, coffee, indigo, fortunes flowed from that single island into French coffers. But there was one problem. The enslaved population had revolted. Led by Toussaint Louverture, they'd established control over the island and were fighting for their freedom. Napoleon sent his brother-in-law, General Charles Leclerc, with 40,000 troops to crush the rebellion and restore French control. The campaign was supposed to be quick and decisive. Instead, it became a catastrophe. Yellow fever decimated the French forces. Guerrilla warfare bled them dry. Leclerc himself died of disease. Within a year, Napoleon had lost nearly 30,000 soldiers and burned through millions of francs with nothing to show for it. Without Saint-Domingue, Louisiana was useless. It was a vast territory with no profitable export economy of its own. It needed Saint-Domingue to make financial sense. And with the Haitian Revolution succeeding, yes, the first successful slave revolt in history was also an economic calculation that ended Napoleon's American ambitions. Louisiana became a liability Napoleon could no longer afford. But the real pressure came from Europe. Napoleon was preparing to go to war with Britain again. Wars cost money, enormous, relentless amounts of money. And Napoleon's treasury was empty. The Haiti disaster had drained his reserves. French banks were reluctant to lend. He needed cash immediately, and he needed it in a form that wouldn't destabilize his government or expose him to political attacks at home. Selling Louisiana solved multiple problems at once. It raised instant revenue. It eliminated the cost of defending an indefensible territory, and it handed Britain's emerging rival, the United States, a massive landmass that would eventually threaten British interests in North America. Napoleon wasn't just selling land. He was weaponizing America's expansion against his primary enemy. From Napoleon's perspective, this wasn't a loss. It was damage control, with a geopolitical bonus. But here's where the story gets stranger. The United States didn't have $15 million. Jefferson's government was still recovering from Revolutionary War debts. The federal budget was tiny. The Treasury couldn't produce that kind of liquidity on short notice. So how did America pay for Louisiana? It didn't. Not really. The deal was structured as a financial instrument, a bond offering underwritten by European banks, specifically 2 institutions, Baring Brothers in London and Hope and Company in Amsterdam. The same banks that had financed American independence were now financing American expansion. And here's the kicker: Hope and Company was also lending money to Napoleon. Think about that. The bank financing the American purchase was simultaneously financing the French wars that made Napoleon desperate enough to sell. They were playing both sides of the table, collecting interest from everyone and turning geopolitical chaos into profit. The structure worked like this. The U.S. government issued bonds worth $15 million. Baring and Hope bought those bonds at a discount, then resold them to European investors at a markup. The United States got the land, Napoleon got immediate cash, and the banks pocketed the spread, the difference between what they paid and what they sold the bonds for. But the deal came with conditions. The bonds were denominated in dollars, but payable in multiple currencies, francs, pounds, guilders, to accommodate European investors. Interest rates were set at 6%. A premium reflecting the risk of lending to a young nation with shaky credit. And the repayment schedule stretched over 15 years, meaning the United States would be paying for Louisiana well into the 1810s. This wasn't a purchase, it was a leveraged acquisition financed through international debt markets. Jefferson didn't buy Louisiana with American money, he bought it with European credit. And just like the Revolution, foreign capital made American expansion possible. Inside the United States, the Louisiana Purchase triggered a constitutional crisis that most people have forgotten. Jefferson, the champion of limited government and strict constitutional interpretation, couldn't point to any clause in the Constitution that authorized the federal government to acquire new territory. His political opponents, the Federalists, were quick to point this out. But Jefferson had a problem. If he waited for a constitutional amendment, Napoleon might change his mind, or Britain might blockade the deal, or domestic opposition might kill it entirely. The window of opportunity was narrow, so Jefferson did what pragmatic leaders often do when ideology conflicts with opportunity. He ignored his own principles and moved forward anyway. He justified it by arguing that treaty-making power gave him the authority. It was a stretch, even he admitted that privately. But the deal was too good to pass up. Jefferson sacrificed constitutional consistency for territorial gain, and in doing so, established a precedent. When the stakes are high enough, flexibility trumps philosophy. Domestically, the purchase reshaped the political landscape. Federalists opposed it, fearing that Western expansion would dilute their power base in the Northeast. They were right. As new states entered the Union from the Louisiana Territory, the political balance shifted. The agrarian, decentralized vision Jefferson championed gained ground, and the financial interests tied to northeastern cities found themselves competing with a growing western frontier economy built on land speculation, agriculture, and resource extraction. The banks that financed the deal became even more embedded in American policy. Baring Brothers in particular became the unofficial financial agent of the U.S. government in Europe for decades. They handled bond sales, managed currency exchanges, and brokered loans. The Louisiana Purchase didn't just expand America's geography, it deepened America's integration into European financial networks. And those networks had interests of their own. What almost no one realizes is that the Louisiana Purchase created the template for American expansion. Borrow money, acquire land, sell land to settlers and speculators, use the revenue to pay off the debt, and repeat. It was a self-reinforcing cycle that turned territorial growth into a financial engine. After Louisiana, the U.S. acquired Florida through a combination of military pressure and financial negotiation with Spain. Texas was annexed after American settlers, many of them land speculators, engineered a rebellion and requested statehood. The Mexican-American War, whatever its political justifications, resulted in the U.S. acquiring California and the Southwest in exchange for $15 million, the exact same price as Louisiana. The pattern was unmistakable. Identify weak or desperate sellers, apply pressure, and close the deal with borrowed money. But the Louisiana Purchase also planted the seeds of the Civil War. The territory was so vast that its political organization became a flashpoint. Would new states be free or slave? The Missouri Compromise, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, the Dred Scott decision. These were all aftershocks of the Louisiana Purchase. The deal that made America a continental power also made it impossible to avoid the question of slavery's expansion. And when that question couldn't be answered politically, it was answered with war. Financial decisions create political consequences, always. The influence of the Louisiana Purchase reaches even further than most people imagine. It established the U.S. dollar as a legitimate instrument in international finance. Before Louisiana, American bonds were speculative and risky. After Louisiana, after the U.S. successfully serviced its debt and proved it could manage large-scale financial obligations, American creditworthiness improved. European investors began to see the United States not as a fragile republic, but as a viable long-term investment. This mattered enormously. By the mid-1800s, European capital was flooding into American infrastructure, canals, railroads, factories. The Louisiana Purchase proved that America could borrow, expand, and repay. It turned the United States into a magnet for foreign investment, and foreign investment turned the U.S. into an industrial power. And here's the geopolitical irony. Britain, France's enemy, indirectly enabled the purchase by tolerating the deal. Why? Because British banks were involved in financing it. Because a stronger United States meant a weaker Spain and a distracted France. Because Britain's strategic calculus favored a large, commercially friendly United States over a French-controlled Mississippi River. Once again, financial incentives shaped the behavior of empires. Nations didn't act on principle. They acted on profit and positioning. So what does this tell us? The Louisiana Purchase is taught as American exceptionalism, a visionary leader seizing an opportunity to expand a young nation. But strip away the mythology and you find something more instructive. Desperation on one side, opportunism on the other, and international banks facilitating both. Napoleon sold because he was broke and losing a war he couldn't afford. Jefferson bought because European bankers handed him the credit to do so. And the deal reshaped the continent not because of ideals, but because of incentives. This is how territorial expansion actually works. It's not driven by destiny or doctrine. It's driven by cash flow problems, credit access, and geopolitical leverage. The nation that can borrow wins. The nation that can't loses. And if that sounds familiar, it should. Today, nations still expand influence through debt. They offer loans to smaller countries in exchange for strategic access. They finance infrastructure projects that double as political leverage. They use credit as a tool of power, just as Britain, France, and the Netherlands did in the 18th and 19th centuries. China's Belt and Road Initiative is Louisiana Purchase logic on a global scale. Lend money, build infrastructure, secure influence, and wait for the returns. The International Monetary Fund does the same thing with structural adjustment loans. Even private equity follows this model. Buy assets with borrowed money, extract value, and use the returns to fund the next acquisition. The Louisiana Purchase wasn't just a land deal, it was a proof of concept. Debt-fueled expansion works, and every empire since has studied the lesson. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it'll crush you all the same. The United States didn't become a continental power because of vision. It became a continental power because Napoleon went bankrupt at exactly the right moment, because European banks saw profit in financing both sides, and because Jefferson was willing to bend his own rules when opportunity knocked. The purchase was a gamble that paid off, but it was a gamble financed by foreign creditors, enabled by geopolitical chaos, and built on the same financial infrastructure that had created the United States in the first place. America didn't manifest its destiny, it leveraged it. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.